particular?
I was going to bring my book's at home, and because I thought there was some interesting things about the solitude thing, but I don't have it in front of me right now. I don't, but it was, but did anyone else think anything was interesting about the solitude? Like that you want to point out before we kind of continue on, because we have silly stuff we got to go through as well.
Well, I liked right away that I never really thought about it, but when God rested, it wasn't because he was exhausted, and that was Adam's first day on earth. He wasn't exhausted either. They started out with time together. That solitude and rest isn't a reward from work. It's a necessary start before you work.
Right.
And that's something I really got out of that.
Yeah. A good mindset.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that was something that we did in the sermon. Like we added Sabbath into that whole idea, and it wasn't in Zach's sermon, which I was really surprised. I'm like, dude, you're talking about it the whole time. You're just not using the word. So like, I think I'm glad that he brought in those moments of Sabbath into the book, like that. That's because it was definitely in there.
Yeah.
That's, and so like, I really enjoyed connecting that solitude and Sabbath, and that's what I enjoyed about the sermon too, is like remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. We normally think like, oh, I'm just going to go to church, and then we're going to go to Cheddar's afterwards, and then do whatever. And it's that day. It's that day of resting. Like that's where you can kind of rejuvenate yourself and kind of begin that being with God. And I liked the whole stance of like that it helps you find your center again. The world is just pulling you from every direction, and
Not just once a week though, but if you do that every morning or whenever it's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
I find that early morning is my best time, and it really does make a difference. If I don't have that morning time, I see my day kind of whirls out of control. But if you take that time and just center yourself and get back to where you should start, it makes a difference to me.
There was one statement right before he gives you John 15:16. God often uses the pain from our past to give us new purpose. Our greatest impact comes out of our deepest pain. And that just exploded in my head. I mean, that was something I hadn't ever put together or thought about, actually. And I think that, especially with what happened over in Fort Myers on the West Coast, the timing of hitting that and everything was like, whoa, I wonder how many people over there realize that. Our weakness will make us stronger.
I mean, that's like the wilderness, all of the wilderness journeys, like Jesus' wilderness journey, involved temptation. You have the children of Israel's wilderness journey coming out of the slavery, and that wasn't an easy time, like that's all these things. Like you sounded like you wanted to say something.
Just wanted to say that, my own having been molested at age 15 by a very prominent member of my church led me to become a Boy Scout master, a Girl Scout leader, and a youth director at a church. And because of that, I didn't want to see that happen to any other kid. So that pain led me to do hopefully some good. Hopefully.
And so I think that's and I can see that in my own life too, where it's like, oh, like you see all these things, and that's why, like when we were talking about it in the sermon, there are these Sabbaths that we choose, like the morning ones, but there's always those forced ones too that kind of just happen to us. Like life becomes too much, and you have to pull away. Yeah, like that. It's just, and I almost liken those times to being in the wilderness.
Yeah.
You know, like that's, and those wilderness times are generally where you kind of, you solidify some things. And sometimes you come out of them really well, sometimes you don't. It's everyone's different, but I know in my own life that there were some of those times are when I got my understanding of God changed. Type of thing. So that's, I don't know. Were there any other thoughts?
Well, I worked for years with public, and I decided that it was good for me because it taught me patience.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I probably would never have the patience I have today.
Yeah.
Job.
Yeah. The you guys on the Zooms are being quiet. Did you want to add anything?
It's more fun listening.
It's more fun listening.
We're digesting what's being
Okay.
said.
Yes.
All right. You're all good. I don't want to leave you guys out. Well, good. I think that's all good stuff. That's all good stuff there. So our kind of silly question for today has to do with our smartphones. Now this is more of a millennial question than probably for the
What's a smartphone?
yeah smartphone. So are you guys Apple or Android, and why? Like for those of you that have smartphones. Apple.
It's Android.
Yeah.
Whole time from the first time I had a phone, that was a smartphone.
Yeah.
It was Android up until just maybe a month ago.
Oh yeah.
And I've gone to Apple, and if you learn on Android, you're Android. If you learn on Apple, you're Apple.
Yeah.
So the transition is a little bit different.
It's a bit steep. It's a bit steep. Yeah.
Wouldn't say one is better than the other. I just think it's whatever you learned on so far.
So far.
Yeah.
So far. Does anyone have any strong opinions about their Apple or Androids?
Android, because it's flat.
It's less. Yeah.
I will say one thing.
Yeah.
The Apple phone does not have the app I want for the Bible.
Oh really?
The Lutheran Bible app, I cannot find the
Oh really?
one that I have on my, I kept my Android phone and I still use it with Wi-Fi. I use it because of that Bible.
Yeah.
Because I like the access. It's very good. I
Yeah.
can't find a good one
Oh.
on there, so you'll have to help me.
I
find
have
one.
the literal word is the one that I've
Is that
got on
one
my
you
Apple.
use? And is it easy to
You got one, don't you?
go through?
Oh, yeah.
Is
I got
that,
one.
I
I
haven't
use
found one easy to go through yet.
I use Bible Gateway.
Yeah,
Bible Gateway.
yeah, Bible Gateway.
I don't
Bible
use
Gateway.
I use that one everywhere. Yes, I even give them $5 a month. I use it so much.
My
So like that's, but that includes commentaries and all that stuff.
I started with Apple because my husband bought that for me,
Oh yeah.
but he's Android.
Oh really?
And he says, oh, those apples, those are just a piece of junk. Oh, it's like, well,
This is what
Now you know.
this is the action I wanted out of it.
Many years ago, we started with Android, but switched to Apple because our kids were Apple and we could FaceTime. And we've been Apple ever since.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's-
everybody like that.
and iPad.
Yeah, iPad and all that. Like
That
that's
was a neighbor.
yeah, like that's definitely like my sister had Android phones for a little bit, then she switched back to Apple, and it's mainly for iMessage because she was tired of being a green bubble, if you guys know what that is. And so,
So when are you changing to Apple?
me, it's when I want to downgrade my phones, I will. Like that's but it's like Cheryl says, like the Android stuff's cheaper, like this isn't. So like but T-Mobile, but they're always trying to get you with the phones. but yeah, like that. So I sold my soul to Google years and years ago. Like we're talking 15 years ago now.
One of them
Like,
Chinese,
yeah.
one of those Chinese companies, right?
yeah, to Google. No, that's Google's American as it gets, and that's kind of the cool thing. Is Google and Apple both are. Google makes Android. Basically, they don't always make the phones.
iOS or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, those are both good American companies. Like that. That's and yeah, this phone's manufactured by Google. So
Well, they make it so easy to switch to a new phone when you got everything else.
yeah. I mean,
And
especially
all your stuff is there.
yeah, and on all that stuff, it takes less time to do phones than computers, but everything being online now. And what I mean by sold to Google is I did this to Midge when Midge was in the office here. I said we're not going to use Word anymore. We're switching to Google, and all of our bulletins, everything that's made inside the church is all in Google Drive, Google Docs, all that stuff. And the reason why is that we have 4 people that look at the bulletin every week, and they can look at it from their phone. They can do what they want from anywhere, and it changes in real time. So, but it's the whole point of this talking about cell phones is like these little buggers can be the epitome, the very center of our distraction, epitome, right? Yeah, of our distraction. Like it can be the midst of it, and can serve as a distraction away from everything. And I've realized, and it's even can be like an intentional distraction. I was going to joke, my shower time is kind of where the demons come to roost with me, where anything mean anyone's ever said always comes back, like over there. And one of the things that our shower has a nice ledge that's outside of the water now. And so I usually get like a YouTube video burning. But the thing is, it's less quiet time. It's just constantly digesting something, that's something that I've kind of realized, and all those things. We won't go through this because it'll probably take time, but your phone records the amount of time you spend on it every day.
Right.
Like that's out of you've ever. I don't know if you've ever looked at that, but sometimes you can feel good about yourself. It's sometimes not. Like it's I don't know if you know how much data you use every month. If you look at that, Coley uses about 40 gigabytes of data on her phone every month.
Wow.
Like it's nuts, but she's always usually burning a YouTube video. I guess she's working. She'll just have something going on in the background, just watching something. Yeah, flip phones. Yeah, they don't do that.
It's pretty quiet.
Talking about you, Diane.
There's also nice things about it because there's some of this stuff you can watch or listen to.
Oh yeah.
I've done your recordings out of Grace.
Oh yeah.
Just click them on and I can go about my business and have it in my ears. It's perfect. Works for me.
Yeah.
And I can get stuff done, multitask.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, there's a reason why we all have them. But but just like everything that's good has that
Stop somewhere.
And I think that's why it's a good example. Like I thought this was a good example of these little things. There's a lot of good that we do with these things, communication, being able to watch stuff, the calendar. Oh my goodness. I mean, Cheryl's got captions running right now of everything that what we got going on.
If I didn't have one, I couldn't get around Florida when I first got here.
Yeah.
No hills still.
There's no hill.
You have to go by the sun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most days that's okay. Not yesterday. Right?
Being how flat it is, I was on Tuesday. Hi, Pam. On Tuesday, I went with a group of people up to the top of the parking deck of the event center. And I didn't realize how far you could see from up there. Like you had no problem seeing the Tradition Hospital or like that. That's one of those things. It's
Oh, shopping is in there.
yeah.
I just feel like we need to do that.
Kind of get bearings.
You know,
The
relationship.
relationship,
Around
yeah.
to see where he
You,
really
you
is.
also realize how green Port St. Lucie is, which is good, which is good. So like that's because it's just you just get above the canopy of trees and you just can see the trees like this over there. But yeah, it was kind of wild. But yeah, I mean, we get distracted by these things, and sometimes it takes us a little bit to need that solitude, give ourselves a rest, you know. So we're gonna watch the video now of Zach.
So welcome back to Red Letter Being Challenged, where we're challenging you to put the habits of Jesus into your life. As we walk on this long journey called life, it's important that we embody exactly who Jesus was and what he did and what he said. And so today's habit is one of the ones I was actually surprised at just how often it came up in the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it's this practice of Jesus spending alone time with God. So we're calling this habit seeking solitude. Jesus sought solitude all the time. In fact, as I was reading through the scriptures, I found about 39 different times where Jesus either sought solitude or preached and taught on the importance of alone time with God. I know some other habits have been committing to community, and also there's next week choosing church, which is definitely involving a lot of people in our lives. But Jesus had this beautiful balance of knowing how much time to spend with people and then when he needed to be alone with God. Jesus sought solitude before making big decisions, before he went out and picked the 12 disciples. Jesus sought solitude before doing the hard work, even in the middle of the hard work, before enduring the cross, the hardest thing ever for him. Jesus even sought solitude when he grieved the loss of one of his friends, John the Baptist, as he was martyred for his life. You see all these times in which Jesus was seeking solitude. Are you seeking solitude? You know, in our day, it's really easy for us to not only be confused, we talked about that last week with all the options, but I call this a very loud and distracting world. In fact, I can't go very, very long without what? Phones buzzing and watches beeping and emails dinging and notifications popping. I mean, everywhere I am, I'm surrounded by, it seems like, distraction. The tech company Asurion took a look at cell phones and actually a couple of years ago found that the average person checks their phone 80 times a day. That's the average person. The average millennial is closer to 150, which tells us we can't go 5 to 10 minutes without seeing what's new on the phone. And in fact, only 1 out of 4 of you watching this right now can use the bathroom without watching your smartphone. I think we've gotten a little bit too distracted. And so if prayer was the answer last week for how we can connect to God in a confusing world, I believe that solitude is the answer for us for how we can disconnect from the world, from the very loud, distracting world, and engage with God again to regain our focus. So in order to help you think about solitude and focus, I heard a story about a horse in Florida named Macho Again. Now this is Brandon Henry, our local horse here. But this racehorse, Macho Again, actually did quite well, earned almost $2 million, although he didn't get to spend any of that money on himself. The owners of Macho Again noticed a lot of potential in the early races. This guy could get out there really quick, but what happened in the early races is he would lose focus and he would look to the side and he would get distracted and he would look back, and objects were in his sort of predator threat zone. And so they tried to figure out, how can we get this racehorse to run the race that we know he can run? And so they did something early. They put on something called blinders on this horse, and the blinders are meant to kind of go on the sides of the horse's eyes so that as the horse races, he can't look back and he can't look to the side, but rather keeps his eyes focused on the prize, which for them was the finish line and the almost $2 million that they ended up earning. And I really believe that blinders for horses is a lot like solitude for humans. That God has also called us to run a race, and yet as we're running this race in this world, as we're trying to be the greatest followers that we can be of Jesus Christ, we live in a loud and distracting world where we can lose our focus. I don't know about you, but I need to focus in my life. And I'm thinking, man, if Jesus, who was the most focused individual ever to live, had times where he sought alone time with God to recharge and to refocus, how much more do I need that in my life? In fact, as a preacher, one of the things that I do nearly every Sunday is I get to deliver a message. And it happens in a lot of ways. The preparation, it happens through the studying of Scripture, through prioritizing prayer, some of the things we've talked about, through collaborating in community. But I think for me, where it really comes together is in my spending time with God, my solitude with Him, where it's just me and Him. In my solitude, I tell you, my dreams go farther than they go anywhere else. My imagination goes places, it goes nowhere else. And this is the time where I feel most connected to God and where I feel like my purpose with Him is most revealed. You have been called to run a race. And as we run this race, these habits are meant to help you run faster, to help you run farther than you think you could go. In fact, Paul, the writer of Hebrews, tells us that we are to run the race and to throw off everything that hinders us, the sin that so easily entangles us, and to run the race with perseverance marked for us. How do we do it? By fixing our eyes on Jesus Christ, who he says is the pioneer and perfecter. Other translations say the author and the finisher of our stories. God is writing a beautiful story for you. It's a wonderful thing that God is doing in your life. And so as we tell these stories with our lives, may we never get so enamored and distracted by the things of this world, as good as they may be, and lose our focal point, which is Jesus Christ.
Excellent. All right. Good deal. Good deal. So, we kind of talked about Mark, all spring and into the summer around here. And, some of the times Jesus sought solitude there was like when he went into the wilderness, after he's baptized, he went into the wilderness. It's all the times that he would be near water, like be by the lake or the sea. And he's kind of like, let's get off by ourselves. Like last week we talked about the feeding of the 5,000, like
Right.
that originally was him trying to get away from everybody, and they all followed him out there, like he's trying to do that. That's what he's doing when he picks his disciples. When he's talking about, he prays early, often, and alone type of thing in that verse. It's in chapter 4. It has like when he's on the water in the midst of the storm, kind of before all of that, he's taking that time. When he goes on the side of the mountain, before all that. And then the big one, I think, is like the Garden of Gethsemane. Yeah, that's before he goes and is that sacrificial lamb, to quote, John there, like that he has those moments of solitude where he kind of just takes a break from everything that's going on here. So not only did Jesus seek solitude at many different times and places, he also sought solitude before, during, and after major life events. So we're just doing these over again, just different gospels here. Before like the 40 days in the wilderness, before he started his ministry, calling of the disciples, and and I thought this one was good. He grieved his friend and cousin John the Baptist after he was martyred for his faith. That's the one we were talking about before the feeding of the 5,000. Like he takes that time there. So do you guys have any practices or habits, as we call them, or rhythms in your life of solitude that you would like to share, that you think are helpful or at least work for you, if you have anything?
Well, I do an early morning thing. When I get up, like Louise was talking about. I get up and I have my bathrobe and I go and I fix my beverage in the morning with something to eat and sit down, and then I have a funny calendar, which is very often spiritual, and then I have the spiritual one that's private news to me. You flip the day and you read what that says, and you can go and look up and say, whoa, tell me more. I want to know the backstory, like you call it.
Mhm.
And then my Bible, as I was sitting there, and we have a book like this. But I like my first half hour of actually my feet following the rest of me and not bumping into things. My mind is focused on my lessons from Jesus for the day.
Mhm. All right. Yeah. Nice. That's good. Does anyone else have anything?
I basically do almost the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
First thing in the morning, I really
Hmm.
can be quiet and think about who I need to pray for. And
Yeah.
things like that.
I'm cantankerous. I do it from 10 to 10:30 at night.
Yeah.
Nighttime. I'm too tired. I
Oh,
have to do it early in the morning. That's the best time.
And I find the older I'm getting that I'm often awake in the middle of the night. I don't sleep all night long.
Yeah.
And I use that time to pray. And now with this too, with that, and I do like a breathing, like
Oh, the breathing
and I like
isn't it?
his Yahweh breathing.
Oh, yeah. They always. Oh, yeah.
If I'm like wide awake, I just try and slow my breathing down so I can fall back. But then I'm praying too during that time.
Yeah.
Being frustrated because I'm awake.
Yeah.
It does clear your thoughts, though, don't you think? When you
Yeah.
do the breathing
Yeah.
thing, I'd never done that before, and when we were doing it in the book, I
Yeah.
started doing it in the morning, and I thought, this really works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I mean,
I like
this
that.
really works.
Yeah.
Your mind clears,
Yeah.
and your thoughts are more.
Cognizant.
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah, I really enjoyed that. I do mine outside too.
Oh, yeah.
And so these last 2 days have been a challenge.
Great. The great Florida winter. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really cold, but it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but going outside, and even though I'm still confined to a backyard, I like out in
Mhm.
where we grew up. I could go into the woods. I mean, you wouldn't hear any cars or any
Yeah.
noises from people. It would be nature. And so this is even in the backyard, though. There's something to be said about His Majesty, because did you see the sky last night? I mean, it was absolutely
Beautiful.
gorgeous. And realizing that this is what He's made, really makes me in awe of it.
If it's cold in Florida and I'm sitting there at my little table and I get up to warm myself, I light a little candle. And the candle brings me warmth just in my mind. And everything all of a sudden is not, I'm very safe about it, but that candle somehow is a symbol of warmth that comes with opening the Bible. If it's cold.
One of the things that you say about nature, like when I meet with people here that are kind of struggling with things and all that, I always tell them it's like you can just go into, like, even sitting at the outdoor chapel, like you get quiet. But if you go past the outdoor chapel, I'm like, don't go too far, don't go into other people's property and all that stuff. But you go back, that's where the Bobcats are. You go back there.
Bobcats.
Very quiet back there, very quiet. And so like you kind of lose. You can hear the turnpike a little bit, like
That's great wilderness, right?
Yeah. So like that's. So that's important to see those things, and also important to realize the things that are distracting us from keeping solitude. Be it our disasters keep happening in our lives, kind of like over there, and that's the biggest thing that I've seen is that there's always the next disaster that you can fix. And sometimes you just got to take the time, or you'll just burn yourself out. You do too much, and that's my practice is really like on the days when I'll still do a little bit of work, but I get up slowly, because I don't do mornings well. You need to understand that about me. I get slow moving, like there's a lot of momentum that's got to be built up for me. So if I allow that to come, I'm just a much more pleasant individual then. Like, that's, you know, and so that's typically like Monday for me. Like Monday morning is typically that kind of time for me. And so, but yeah, that's kind of that solitude. So I want to read, and this is kind of an odd story that for solitude, but I think it's a good one. It's one that Zach recommended, and I think it's a good one for looking at all this. So it's Luke chapter 8, verse 40 through 56. And so Luke chapter 8, verse 40 through 56, and we'll listen to it here. So we'll share the screen. Oh, come on there. Uh-oh. I got problems. I got problems.
Oh, no.
Here it is. I found it. All right, here we go. So we go over here, share. All right, and we'll listen to this. So I'm going to ask you, where are the places of solitude? So here we go.
So it was when Jesus returned that the multitude welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of the synagogue. And he fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying. But as he went, the multitudes thronged him. Now a woman, having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment. And immediately her flow of blood stopped.
Who touched me?
When all denied it, Peter and those with him said,
Master, the multitudes throng and press you, and you say, who touched me?
Somebody touched me, for I perceived power going out from me.
Now when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling, and falling down before him, she declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately.
Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace.
While he was still speaking, someone came from the ruler of the synagogue's house.
Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher.
But when Jesus heard it, he answered him,
Do not be afraid. Only believe, and she will be made well.
When he came into the house, he permitted no one to go in except Peter, James, and John, and the father and mother of the girl. Now all wept and mourned for her.
Do not weep. She is not dead, but sleeping.
And they ridiculed him, knowing that she was dead. But he put them all outside, took her by the hand, and called,
Little girl, arise.
Then her spirit returned, and she arose immediately. And he commanded that she be given something to eat. And her parents were astonished, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened.
There we go. Okay, so what were the moments of solitude that you kind of noticed in there?
The little girl by himself.
The little girl by himself. Like that's what else happened around there? Like what?
I think that getting everybody out.
Okay.
And he needed that quiet to just what he wanted to do.
Yeah. So like that's getting everyone out. Yeah. What other things?
I think he felt solitude when the lady touched his garment.
Yeah.
He was alone then. Everybody was there, but he was alone. She touched him.
Noticed that.
Like who touched me? Yeah. Like I thought, and that's why when I first looked at this, I was like, why is this story there?
Yeah.
And then like that whole idea of like everyone, or as the King James puts it, thronging against him. You know, he's using those words like we use them now, like that. There's such a throng at the football game, but
I think even the woman that was being healed felt alone in that crowd.
Yeah.
She was always
They were like,
she could never be around
Just the
other
two of them.
people with that trouble that she had. They banned people from the churches or the synagogue.
Yeah.
She had
Who's considered unclean.
Yeah. And also like this concept of like the forced solitude, like that she was participating in
For many years.
Yeah, for a long
12
time.
years.
Yeah, 12 years. And that's which is like you start looking at 12, and that's like, it's like all the years. Like that's, like that's 12 disciples and all of that stuff. Like it's you got that there too. So like, yeah, so she's kind of facing that forced solitude, and like her coming out there, everyone else probably didn't matter too much. And then you have all that pulling and of Jesus. And I don't know, are there any other moments, do you think?
I always wondered, not from this story necessarily, but when Jesus arose out of the tomb, and then the angel he was there, and there's a time in between when you just feel like he was in solitude and got with the Father and did what he was supposed to do, to serve, that he was totally alone during that time, not interrupted, not distracted, not doing anything. He was so, in my mind, so holy and so precious and so ready finally. He was not in solitude when when he came upon the others.
Yeah.
There was that period of alone time in there that I just felt no one else could ever experience that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of solitude some of us need.
and so there's the solitude around Jesus dying and rising again. That's probably the a little bit of that forced solitude maybe there. It's connected to all of that. I'm just amazed in this story that we're reading here about how just everyone is pushing it around them, and that things can feel that way. There's just all the pushing on around, and then all of a sudden he's like he is willing to stop. Like, how many people are wanting things,
pulling them all the directions.
Yeah. Like how many, and that is able just to stop and push it all aside and just focus on one type of thing. And to even though it sounded ridiculous, and also you got to think about Jairus or Jairus or what? Jairus, yeah. Yeah. Like, that's you got to remember him too. Like he's the synagogue leader, so he's like the dude in the town. Like I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking about like my education level and all that, and the real reason why my like I have a master's degree, but it's a lot longer than a typical master's degree, and the reason why that is the original model for the LCMS did was that when a pastor would be called to a town, he was usually like one of the highest educated people in that town. So you usually have like the doctor and then the pastor, and like that was kind of the model. And it's not really that case anymore, but and just everything functions differently now. But that would have definitely been the model with him. So you have a guy, the Jairus or Jarius or however we're going to pronounce it, like that he's like the dude in the town. He's probably one of the most educated. He's probably one of the more wealthy. How many things did he try to do before finally coming to Jesus? Because Jesus is probably, all of his little buddies are like, don't even go to him, man. He's terrible. Like all that stuff. So he's finally there. And then like, he's also like, come on, Jesus, let's keep it. Let's let's up to, let's
my daughter we're talking about.
Yeah. Like that's, and there's those 4 stops even that he has. And like the biggest one that I see also is when one of the servants comes, like it's too late, where like just what kind of a crushing is that, and Jesus in that is like, hey, just asleep. It's okay. continue to have faith and believe, and then we have what Gloria mentioned. I think that's. I don't know. Do you see any other mentions of solitude in that?
Death,
You know what?
the child,
Oh, and her death.
her death. Talk about the most alone time there is.
Yeah.
That moment. When reading it, I was getting a mental image of her soul rising from the body, and Jesus just saying, "Arise," and just it went right back into her.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. I mean that's so you had this like forced solitude onto her, and like and that she's there, and you have this story that I think is really interesting of all these desires and these people in the story, from Jairus to Jesus to the lady that had the bleeding and all that. And for those of you that are new, this is one of my favorite stories. It's really hard for me not to preach a very certain sermon of mine about all this, but like the thing you got to remember about the lady with the bleeding is that it was probably a menstrual bleed, most likely, which means that she was always dirty and unclean, and she couldn't even be part of that synagogue. She couldn't be part of, like, she was fundamentally separated from God. Yeah. So unclean during that time, and so she so just you have all these moments of either forced solitude or chosen solitude, kind of, and just the world just pulling on all these things, and we see Jesus like picking and choosing. I don't think is the right word, but like these, and bringing healing in these moments of solitude. And I think that's good for us, and good reminders for us, and how we go into these things within either these forced moments of solitude or these ones that we choose. Yeah. Like Pam, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good. I'm listening.
Okay, all right.
Came up from it.
I thought you came up on the thing. So, all right. So let's see. We also have. I'll just read Zach's paragraph here. So, Jesus had an extremely busy life, and he was very wanted man. Crowds continually followed him, pressed in on him, and made requests of him. And yet, in the midst of all the busyness, Jesus was never too hurried that he missed out on the one person that needed him in that moment. Solitude with God allowed Jesus to stay focused on the mission of God that God called him to, and God has called you to that same mission. So, Hebrews 12, the beginning of it, 1 and 2, it says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race that is marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." But I think that's good. Like, throw aside all the things that entangle us and get us in trouble. And that, I think, now coming full circle for this whole thing, we talked about there's things that work and there's things that help. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, like, even though the world may be collapsing around you, it's like, oh, I got to get all this stuff done. Sometimes you just got to go, wait, like, because that's where you can rejuvenate, and because that's often the thing that helps. And what did I used to say? I don't say it here much. I said it a lot in Bentonville, but it was, the world doesn't need you burned out is basically the whole point for this. Like the world, like you're rushing right now, and you're no help if you're burned out.
You're no good to anybody else unless you care you first.
Yeah. And so that's, yeah.
Well, I hadn't ever thought of this story that same way, but so he was going with Jairus for an important mission. His daughter's dying.
Yeah.
But yet you could almost call the lady touching his garment a distraction.
Yeah. For giants.
Yeah. And but he could. So when we think, okay, this is where I need to be going, if something distracts us, we need to pay attention what God's putting in our way, maybe, because then the miracle of bringing the gal back to life, the girl, was from the dead, not just healing a sick girl. She, so it was
to bring it full fruition.
Yeah. So it was important that he stopped even for that part of the miracle.
Yeah. It's a very complicated story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point in allowing that complexity to kind of go allow in it, because our lives are never straightforward as much as we'd like them to be sometimes. It's like, if I do this, it's 100% correct to do it, our lives, and sometimes there's complexity in that. And I think in the midst of that complexity, it's important to remember that sometimes we just got to stop, like that's, and get some clarity. Sometimes we got to say no. Sometimes we got to say like, okay, and that just takes wisdom, and every situation is going to be different. And that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. Yeah. And that's so throwing aside all those things that hinder us, like that's all those things. We had someone in my group. Oh, it was actually the dad of the daughter that got baptized. It's like an old classic, like analogy, but if like you have the jar that is your life, you've probably heard of this. Yeah. The rocks and the sand and all that. And if you just fill it with sand, then like, it's like, oh, it seems full. But like, if you put the rocks in it, you can't fit any rocks in it. But if you put the rocks in first, and it looks like, oh, I can't fit any more rocks. Those rocks are like the most important thing. Then you can put in the pebbles. Those are the less important thing, but you can still fit all that stuff in there. Then you can pour like sand, in it, so you can't get any more sand. And you can still think to yourself, oh, it's nothing but full. But then you got all that room for water in there. And the whole point of it, it's a leadership strategy that is like start off with the important stuff. And that's, the big stuff. And that's because if you just fill yourself up with all the insignificant stuff. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Joanne did that. Joanne used to do that as a devotion with rice and ping pong balls.
Rice and ping pong balls. Yeah, exactly. Like it's a classic thing. And so, again, that kind of takes us back to full circle from the beginning with like beginning things in the day, and kind of what you said about the, like starting with Sabbath, starting with solitude, rather than it being like, come after. Yeah. So like that's so, yeah. So I think that's kind of what we got going on. And so, as we think about like solitude, try to form some habits around taking a Sabbath and some solitude. And
one thing he was that he attributed the writing of Hebrews to Paul.
Oh, did he?
I thought there was a discussion about who actually wrote Hebrews.
Oh, there is. There's all kinds. There's some people that have incorrect opinions that think it's Paul. Like that's.
It doesn't read like Paul all the way.
No. If you read it, it doesn't sound like Paul. Like that's the biggest reason why I don't think so. It's like this doesn't sound like Paul, and like I'm glad that you guys can recognize that now. Like that's good, because these people sound they sound like themselves. And you can kind of tell, and even Paul's stuff, that he wrote Romans last. Out of everything that we have, it's definitely the most complete, his like magnum opus of theology, and so yeah. So that, but that's kind of what I have for today. And thanks for joining us. Well, all right. So we need to do some business. Let me say goodbye to the YouTube. So thanks for joining us today. All right.